are the lifeblood of a successful novel. Hi, I'm John Reynolds, and this is another in the series that I produced based on my experience in writing a novel, resulting in a book called Writing Your First Novel, which in turn came out of my first novel, which was called Uncommon Enemy. And in this series, I share some ideas with you on various aspects of writing novels. In this case, we're going to look at characters. Readers can sometimes, when they put a book down or remember it later on, recall the plot, maybe the setting, sometimes. But they're more likely to remember the characters, the people in the novel, how they felt about them. Rhett Butler, Scarlett O'Hara, Elizabeth Bennet, Mr. Darcy, Bilbo Baggins, Gandalf, all those people, they remember the characters. It's with strong characters, with compelling characters, that readers can identify. They can be pleased when the protagonist, and we'll talk about that word later on, when the protagonist gains his or her goal, and the antagonist, the bad guy, gets his or her just desserts. You may already have a draft idea for your novel. You may have started to develop the plots, the settings, environment, and even the time period. But you'll need the characters to breathe life into your story. So where do you find these characters? How do you find resources where you can put them together? Easy. They're all around you. Your family, your friends, colleagues, workmates, people you've met in your past. They're all around you and they're all contrasting. They all have their little characteristics, their little foibles, their ways of doing things, mannerisms, motivations, likes, dislikes. You can draw on all those characters, mix them up, change their names, change the settings, change the environment, change where they were born, just to avoid being sued. But people around you can provide characters, even if you're writing a historical novel, because humans haven't changed that much. So your source is already there. Another source of memorable characters can come from your own reading. If you remember characters from a particular book, characters that have made an impact with you, the memory lingers on because of the way they behaved, or the way they talked, or something else about them, then adapt them and possibly use them for characters in your own novel. One of the most fascinating and rewarding aspects of writing your characters in a novel is the fact that they'll start to take on personalities, to some extent, a life of their own. This will develop from the situations that you introduce them to, or the people that they meet or confront. They'll start to behave in a way that will suit their characters, their personalities. And in many ways, you'll be quite surprised. At the end of the day, you might look back and read that character through and think, yeah, didn't think he'd do that or she'd do that. And that's exciting for you as an author. And I guess it's quite fun for the characters. Your key characters fall broadly into two categories: the protagonist and the antagonist. The protagonist is your main character, generally a character who's on a journey, metaphorically if you like, but they have a goal, they have a need, and that needs to be fulfilled. And that's where the story begins, as they try and find the solution or the goal or the object. It could be something tangible, buried treasure, something like that. They may want to become head of their firm. Or it could be something less tangible. They want to win the love of a child from whom they've become estranged, or the love of a woman that they've met and doesn't seem very interested in them. That's your protagonist. Your antagonist, on the other hand, is normally the person that tries to stop them achieving the goal. The bad guy. The black hat instead of the white hat, if we're talking about Western movies. They're the person that, through various ways, will put obstacles in the path of the protagonist. They can be physical obstacles, or they can manipulate the environment, or they could even pretend to be their friend and just sort of give them the wrong advice, thereby putting obstacles in their way. Your characters should create sympathy or empathy in the minds of your reader. Sympathy means that they identify with the character. They care what happens to them. They worry with them. They rejoice with them. They follow their problems. They follow the issues that they're dealing with. They turn the page to find out what will happen to them. They hope they'll turn out okay in the end. Empathy, on the other hand, means that your reader can understand the bad guy even if they don't like him or her. They've got an insight into why that person behaves in a reprehensible fashion. They may loathe them as a character, but at least with empathy, they understand a little bit more about them. Your characters should also have contrasting characteristics, just like the people you know. Even if they're the same age, gender, from the same background, ensure that there are differences between them. Maybe two friends, one is quiet, thoughtful, the other is noisy and impulsive, just like the people around you. Make sure you contrast them. Their differences and the way they relate to each other in various situations will help you develop characters that are credible, that are realistic. Don't make your characters two-dimensional. Don't make them, metaphorically speaking, cardboard cutouts. Give them hopes, fears, desires, motivations that contrast with each other and give you, your readers, an insight into the characters and the way they behave, and the way they work. Don't make your hero or your heroine almost perfect. Give them problems that they have to deal with, and maybe they stumble, maybe they fall from time to time. Same with the bad guy. Don't make him or her totally bad. Make sure that we get a bit more of an insight into them and how they operate. So they're more complex, they're more realistic, they're more credible. To illustrate the point, I'll use the antagonist in my novel, a guy called Hamish. He's a nasty piece of work, and as the story progresses, his unpleasant and vengeful nature developed to a point where no reader could have any sympathy with him. In my novel, the country is under Nazi occupation, and Hamish is a collaborator. He's joined the Nazi party. He's sitting in his car, just watching the rain coming down. Carol wasn't expecting him until the following day, and tonight he'd been invited to a party function to welcome new members. A German member had smilingly informed him that the plentiful supplies of food, beer and wine would be supplemented by junge Mädchen. He ran his tongue under his top lip, half closed his eyes, and felt a shudder of anticipation surge through him. He turned on the key and reached for the starter button. Young girls, how young, he wondered aloud. So that's Hamish, most unpleasant fellow. But like everybody, he's a complex character. And like everybody, his behaviour has been influenced by variables, things that happened in his childhood, and that applies to everybody. People they've met, environments in which they operate, maybe incidents that have happened to them, have all shaped their character. To try and give Hamish a bit more depth, about a third of the way through the novel, I put in a flashback in which he remembers something that happened to him during his childhood. The scene was still vivid in his mind. She stood by the door with her suitcase at her feet, staring down at him. "Sorry, Hamish," she said. "I never really wanted you." His father's grip tightened on his shoulder and stopped him from going to her. "You will understand when you get older," she continued. "But I've got a chance to lead my own life, and I'm taking it." Our car horn sounded from the street outside, and she looked quickly around. "It's that bastard, isn't it?" His father's voice was hoarse. She shuffled and then smiled without warmth. "Takes one to know one, Dave." Struggling against his father's grip, he stretched out his arms towards his mother. Looking into his eyes, she covered her mouth with her hand to mask a spontaneous intake of breath. She stood still for a moment, then shook her head. "Sorry, Hamish, I've no choice." And she was gone. Bewildered, he looked up at his father, seeking an explanation or a word of comfort. But the man stood staring fixedly at the closed front door. "Bitch," he snarled. Then he looked down at his 7-year-old son. "Don't ever forget it, Hamish. Like all women, your mother's a no good bitch." So, as the novel progresses, Hamish becomes increasingly unpleasant, as I pointed out. But the reader, having read that extract, at least has some insight into what may have caused him to behave in such a dreadful way, particularly towards the women in the novel. A good writer is a troublemaker, as I've pointed out in another video in this series. Your novel should create challenges, trouble, crises for your characters. The way they deal with these problems, how the characters react under pressure, reveals key aspects of themselves and their nature, and gives them additional dimensions and creates greater credibility. Reveal your characters gradually as your novel develops. Don't start with a detailed description of their physical appearance, time and place of birth, childhood, schooling, employment. Give your readers room to create their own images of the characters and build up a gradual knowledge of them as they interact with the other characters. Or in the case of Hamish, as they reveal, or you reveal as the writer, some aspect of them that had happened previously. It makes your characters more credible. Choosing names for your characters is very important. I'd suggest that if there are names that you like, use them for your good characters. Names you dislike, choose them for the characters that you don't like so much, maybe the antagonists. It will help you sort of get into the mood of your characters as you start to create them. A pet hate of mine in novels are names, whether they're first or surnames, that sound the same. It only confuses your reader, so make sure the names contrast. After all, there are thousands and thousands of names to choose from. So don't have Harry and Harold falling in love with Harriet and Henrietta. Your characters should, in my view, be a little larger than life. Now, in the case of Ian Fleming's James Bond, he's very much larger than life. Always wins, seduces beautiful women, moves in the most exotic places. Now, I'm not suggesting that unless you're trying to write a James Bond type thriller, that your character is that much larger than life. But there's nothing wrong with taking a relatively ordinary person and just giving them a few additional dimensions. After all, your readers, when they pick up a novel, are looking for a little bit of escape, something that takes them out of their world, something that enables them to go on an adventure with your characters. And if your characters are a little more heroic than normal, or your villains are particularly nasty, then your readers will enjoy it more. To illustrate the point, my chief female protagonist, Carol, was a beautiful young woman. She's introduced early in the story. She's standing outside a church on a Sunday morning with a group of other young people in their late teens, early 20s, and Stuart, the university student, sees her. The young woman was even more stunning in close-up. Introduced as Carol Peterson, her flowing black hair, stirred slightly by the wind, encased a face that was little short of exquisite. The rest of her was equally attractive. The fabric of the light floral frock flowed effortlessly around a figure that, while slim, filled out appropriately. Expecting the possessor of such beauty to be coolly self-confident, Stuart was agreeably surprised to discover that, having been introduced to him, she answered his questions quite shyly. I portrayed Carol deliberately as a beautiful young woman because I wanted Stuart, my male protagonist, to be instantly attracted to her, and my male readers to imagine a woman of their dreams, and maybe the female readers to identify with her as well. She and Stuart meet up. They have many challenges, and during the development of the novel, Carol's character develops as well. So she's not just a lovely, decorative young woman, but through the various challenges, we get to know her hopes, her fears, her weaknesses, and her strengths. More than just a pretty face, but I wanted a pretty face that maybe was a little larger than life. The most exciting aspect of developing your characters is that they become your people. They're your creation. And they'll provide you with surprise and delight as they take on lives of their own, characteristics of their own, and you go along with that journey. As you put them into various situations, you'll discover how they respond in terms of their speech, their reactions, their actions, the way they relate to other people, and so on. In fact, you'll enjoy the story as much as they will. Good luck with your writing.